Welcome back.
Here we are.
Tuesday morning. I'm working here.
Listen.
I'm working here.
We have a show to do.
We have a show.
Action. So I'm multitasking, right? I got a lot done. Jill, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
making
having
the drive
me.
over from Texas. Jill Tuggle's the executive director. Is that like?
That's correct.
Oh, executive director of the Auto Body Association of Texas. I always have to make sure I get the words in the right order.
I know it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
When I introduce myself, it's like.
Did you just say
sorry.
ABAT or do you say the whole thing?
Well, I've started to say ABAT. Somebody
Okay.
told me last week you can say ABAT now. Everybody knows who ABAT is. I was like, oh.
Oh.
All right.
So we have ABAT and Chuck, right? All right. So I wanted to talk about Department of Insurance complaints, working with your legislators or your local state representatives or even your federal representatives. We did one small class in the C20 Strategic Communication Group on the Department of Insurance, and I think there's a ton of myths about what a DOI is and isn't and what they can and can't do. And so who better, Texas has done some amazing things in the last couple of years. And we want to kind of rope that in and have you talk about your experience. Because we talk about this all the time. I used to have to be the one in the insurance company that responded to complaints. And I hated them.
So you lied.
No.
You lied. We see nothing wrong, and they go,
Each
okay,
claim
rubber
is
stamp.
handled on its own individual merits.
We took the company policies and massaged them into writing.
Seek remedies in a different venue is what you get back.
Oh, you do get that back a lot. But you
Yes.
get that from the DOI, not from me.
Yes,
as I
from the DOI, because you lied to them. So once you lie to the DOI, then they send back, seek remedies in a different venue.
I know you're just mad because you lost.
And I
that's
never
okay.
lost. We wanted that. You don't understand. We couldn't wait to get that.
You
so
did.
the judge would sit there.
You did.
And he would go, why is this here in front of me? Well, here you go, sir.
This is why.
Yeah.
This is why.
So there's some of those myths that get created. So for conversational purposes, because y'all have been on this journey, right? What did Texas and the association learn about the Department of Insurance in your state, and kind of what started your journey with working with them in the way y'all are now?
So, our association is 6 years old now, and one of the first things that we kind of embarked on was trying to help shops with the struggles that they face by going to TDI. So in the beginning, we encouraged everyone to file these TDI complaints, and I should say DOI. Ours is Texas Department of Insurance. But we encouraged people to file these complaints, and we thought that the more we would file, the more noise we would make, the bigger reaction that we would get. And really, it was kind of the opposite. We were just, we felt like things were falling on deaf ears. And in fact, where some of our shops were getting good resolution, that started to slow down a little bit. So in a lot of the things that we do with insurance companies, it seems like the more noise we make, the more pushback we actually get. Mm-hmm. So Burl and several other of the leadership of our association met with TDI, along with Ware Wendell with Texas Watch, their consumer advocacy group. And we wanted to sit down and have a meeting and say, what can we do? Why is nothing happening when we file these complaints? And those meetings, there were a few of those meetings, and they really just nothing really came of it. They just kept saying, well, that's not our jurisdiction, and that's not something we can help with. And we just kept saying, well, if not you, then who? And it was just very circular, like pointing fingers, and we weren't getting anywhere. And ultimately, Burl got a little spirited with them. And they said, listen, you guys are going to have to do this. Most of this is up to a finder of fact. And you guys are going to have to pass some legislation, because we can't help you. We can only do so much. And so that's kind of what led us to our next step here in passing legislation.
Right, and what you're doing. So a Department of Insurance is not they're not DAD, right? You don't run they're not a tattletale type of group. And their job is not to direct claim payment. So they don't go to an insurer and say, you owe this. So a lot of times you'll meet with the Department of Insurance or even the insurance commissioner, and they'll be frustrated that they don't have a lot of revenue or a lot of avenues to get, results or whatever. Because each state will have a group of regulations that evolve around the insurance. And some of those are regulations on how you write premium, what you do, what has to be in the policy, what language, et cetera. Some of those regulations are kind of like just rules of the road, I like to call it. We call those our Unfair Claims Practices Acts in most places that say, here's what's fair and here's what's not fair. So when you're dealing with the Department of Insurance, you can't send them a complaint that says, we're very upset that State Farm won't pay for OEM repair procedures.
Yeah.
Well,
Because
idiotic, yeah.
Because it's not within the parameters of the contract. So in other words, the Department of Insurance does not regulate tort law. Tort law is that relationship between the claimant and the at-fault driver, and so to speak.
Right.
Other than that, when you're in the four corners of a contract, what an insurer decides that they think is a reasonable rate of compensation for a repair is not something that the DOI can really have
And
any
that's
control
the
over.
problem of the insured, not the body shop, and that's where they make a lot of
Right.
mistakes.
So then a lot of people go, when I explain that, go, well, then what are we using the Department of Insurance for at all? Well, a few things. One, they are a record-keeping entity. And if you've noticed in testimony lately, whether it was Washington, whether it was Nebraska, James Rodas and his association, and in y'all's testimony, very frequently what comes up by the lobbyists and the representatives for the insurance companies is that we don't have a problem. So that the piece of legislation or whatever we're trying to pass is that there's not a problem. In some cases, if we go back to, was it Delaware, and the House actually passed a resolution on OE procedures, it gets to the governor's desk and he vetoes it and throws it out. And one of the things he used was, well, I called the Department of Insurance and there was no complaints on file, no complaints on record. Yeah. So if you think about the DOI as being a database of complaints, this is where you get your movement as an association or as a shop or as a, even as a consumer. One complaint gets you nowhere. 50 of the same complaint may open up a business practice investigation. I've been, I don't want to say the victim, right? Because Larry won't let me call me a victim. I've been on an end of those business practices investigations, and we see some get posted around the industry. Minnesota had some where they find an insurer, and sure those fines aren't huge, and we go, a $50,000 fine. But
Which
it
is
changes.
Yeah, for a
It's
billion-dollar
nothing.
company, it's pocket
nothing.
change.
But then it changes the way claims work forward. So it always just plants
That's
a flag.
what the fine doesn't hurt. It's the change of practices or the change of the law that actually works out that way. Similar to what Bari did in Rhode Island over the years, with what they were able to push. But once again, that's still a small state,
Right.
that has a very strong association there, and
Right.
years have been trying for it. So it's that constant push, like you said, to the DOI or the DFS in New York or the TDI, depending on what whoever's governing insurance companies. And, it has to be well written and has to be sent in. But if you don't complain, like Erica complains all the time, I go and talk to DFS in New York, and the guy can name the 3 shops that all the clients are associated with, and how many shops are in New York State alone.
Right.
So that's the problem.
Now, and that becomes a good factor because people that are very educated, and we'll talk a little bit more about what a good complaint looks like, what it should have, what are the key components of it, and we'll show some victories. We'll talk about some victories some people have had. But having it be a base of people across different areas. So if I'm looking at the whole state of Texas or I'm looking at the whole state of Arkansas, but I only have like 1 or 2 shops in Little Rock that keep complaining. And when you had that meeting with the DOI, even though they told you you're going to have to get some legislation, right? We need something that's got a little teeth in it. You guys are still doing. You're still having people file complaints, and
Yes.
you've got it as a very organized factor. So
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the approach that you're having with and the results you're having. You're over what, 400 complaints or something filed right
Yeah,
now?
we are. We're about 430 as of this morning. So
Right.
For what,
our-
a year?
Pardon?
In a year you did 430?
So we started this initiative back in October, knowing that we were coming up on the legislative session, and these complaint forms were really born for a legislative purpose. But we had announced that we were going to try to collect 1,000 of these forms, and we were also going to send them to TDI. And so we're almost halfway to our goal.
Right.
And
So in about 8 months, you got 400 and something.
Yeah.
Well,
Working with-
that's good.
And they're from everywhere across the state, right? So
That's
lots of
correct.
different
Not just
districts.
4
Lots
shops.
good.
Not just,
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'll give you an
Correct.
example
Well,
to laugh about it. One
I
of my
think
clients who we know, the main managers assisted and put in 680 last year.
Yeah.
That's one shop. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So you got the one shop who's jumping up and down screaming, which doesn't make as well as 435 or 450 from
All
60
over.
shops.
Right,
And
the
that's
one
the
shop
big-
just
that's-
appears to be a troublemaker.
Yeah,
That's
that's
one of
just
the
one
big problems
troublemaker,
you're
and
having in
that's the
Washington.
problem
So
that we
we're
have.
looking
Yeah.
at right now the cover letter, kind of the consumer letter. Jill, walk us through this process that Texas set up.
So the important part about this cover letter is that shops, number one, educate their customer on what they're signing, what they're about to do, and what we're trying to do. So it's not just about as the shop filing the complaint. And that was one of the things that we heard last session legislatively, is that we keep hearing from these body shops, and we're starting to look like these whiny body shops, right? But is it really affecting my constituents? Is it really affecting the consumer? And so we thought, well, okay, let's find a way to make them hear from the consumer. So the first page of this letter here is really just to kind of explain to your customer kind of the issues that body shops face, and what we need you to sign this because we want to make some changes in our state, and we know you've been
Now,
negatively
I can hear
affected.
everyone, and I'm going to periodically, you're going to see me pick up the phone and look
Yeah.
for questions, but I can hear everybody right now going, we can't do that. That's collusion. We can't tell insurers that they can, or insureds that they can file complaints.
Absolutely not. In fact, TDI's website encourages a consumer to file a complaint, and actually, a totally different topic. Also, one of the things they encourage before filing a complaint or suing or anything is to invoke their right to appraisal. And so these are all things that we have taken from TDI themselves.
Right.
It could be a whole nother topic on what collusion is and isn't.
And practicing law without a license. So I get that one a lot too. A lot of people say, no, you can't do that. It's antitrust for you to tell consumers to file complaints and to give them some sort of guidance on that.
Well, we had that shop I was just talking about. He got charged with champery from 3 insurance companies because of the 680 complaints in 1 year. And he's
Complaints
like,
are not
I didn't
lawsuits.
send them in.
Yeah.
The customers did. All I did was help them. What came from your shop? You're
Yeah.
telling them.
Yeah, I will say you do need to check with your state, because I do believe some states allow a shop to file a complaint on
Right.
behalf of a consumer,
We've,
and some don't.
I'll be honest, I've only found one so far. Virginia was the only one I've found so far that the shop and the consumer can complain
No,
or
most-
file a complaint.
Most states, anyone can, like Minnesota, only the insured, the policyholder can file a complaint.
Right.
Well, even the claimant. But a lot of states, anyone can file the complaint. It's not taken in the same light when it's a business complaining about
Right.
what they're getting paid versus a consumer complaining about the relationship. The Department of Insurance doesn't exist to regulate the relationship between body shops and insurance companies. It exists to regulate the relationship between insurers of everything, health insurance, workers' comp, whatever, and the citizens of that state. When it comes to business problems, that's what the Attorney General does. And that's their department and their division, and there's
Which
different...
nobody seems to want
there's
to
different
file
laws
a complaint to or
with
send
that.
an email to.
Well,
which
I
works.
think part of the problem is body shops think that they're part of the claims process. You're not. You're not part of the claims process. You're not part of the policy. You're not part of any of this. And so the good news is the DOI can't regulate you either.
Right.
Now, don't feel bad, because not only do sometimes shops feel like they're part of the claims process, sometimes departments of insurance actually feel like they're part of our business. So
Right.
I, as Collision Hub, get letters from departments of insurances telling me that there's complaints and investigations against me, and I'm like, I don't sell insurance in your state.
Right.
So
I don't fix cars in your
Yeah.
state. So it's funny sometimes because it's hilarious when you hear that the Department of Insurance or the body shop says to me, like I just had a talk with somebody from New York State the other day about our Regulation 64, and I was like, what does that have to do with your business? Nothing.
yeah.
Nothing whatsoever. Literally, if the customer walks in and says, I want you to fix my car, you can fix the car.
That's what you do.
Right.
And guess what? The insurance, well, we didn't get to look at it. But go talk to your insured. They're paying me, not you. Well, you didn't give us the opportunity. I don't care. That's your customer who told me to start repairs. You go argue with them, not me.
Yeah.
You know.
So you can, as a shop, and it's not practicing law. Practicing law without a license is when you tell somebody that X, Y, and Z will get you paid, or X, Y, and Z you're owed for something, right?
Or you try and quote a law and you're really off
Right.
on
That's
it.
crossing the line and acting as an attorney. Telling a customer that they have a state-supported tax-ran organization that
you're
helps,
paying for, right?
Yeah, that we're all paying for, right, whatever. That helps speak for the consumer in places where they don't understand. So if I'm a consumer and I hire a contractor and he screws up my house, I can go to the Attorney General's office and one of their investigators will help kind of speak for me,
Right.
help try to get it settled.
Sometimes Better Business Bureau also can help out
Right.
with that, or sometimes the state does have licensing for that, so you do have a licensing bureau to go to, that you can complain about that contract.
And that's what our Department of Insurance does.
Right.
And
It's a Better Business Bureau for insurance companies and insureds.
Right. So as a body shop, even if you can't file complaints, and do, please get them on the record. I'm all about building a case for a business study. But when that report comes in, it means more when it's a customer's name on it, not your name on it. So
Even though you're a constituent to the attorneys, and I saw this when I testified for Rhode Island that time, I can see the constituents, but the representatives are talking to the body shop guys. Well, where's our constituents? And they brought people in.
Right.
So yes, you're the constituents. You pay taxes. You're a business owner. You vote for me, but you're not really my constituents
Right.
because you're business owners. So you're out of this. It's just like the
I want
insurance
real
company is. Oh no, I want to hear from, and they brought in customers
Yeah.
to hear from them. That was the big thing that helped out a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So beyond this cover letter that the consumer gets, so it's like a package. The consumer brings their car in to get it repaired, and the body shop say, "Well, hang this package." Part 2 of this is sort of a checkbox kind of thing. So the customer doesn't even really have to, like, I don't want to say voice it, but they don't have to really like type anything.
Correct. So that's one of the problems with filing a formal TDI complaint. It's a lengthy process. It's several pages long. They have to go into a portal and create an account, and by the time you kind of start explaining this, their eyes have already glazed over because they don't understand a lot of this anyways.
They just want their car fixed.
Yeah. So getting someone to that point is hard anyway. So we thought, okay, let's take all the pain points of filing a TDI complaint and let's try to make it easy. And we sat down and brainstormed as a team on what some of the major complaints are. And then we turn those into these bullet points that you're looking at here. So the client can either check or initial by the things that they experienced during the course of their claim, and then sign at the bottom.
And then it's easy and done.
Yeah.
And then y'all take it from there, right?
We do, and we actually, further down on the form, we collect some personal information because then...
You gotta validate it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they send it to me, and I look up who their local legislators are. So I take that work out of it for them too, even though it's very easy to find out who represents you in Texas, but we want to take all of the pain points away. So the customer just signs it when they pick up their vehicle. You talk about some of the things they experienced and go through the form with them, and then they're done with it.
Right. I want to say thanks to the Auto Body Panel Association that put that website out last week about how aftermarket parts are really great and we should all be in love with them, because they have a button that you click and it tells you who your federal and state representatives are real easy. It's like, oh, thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks.
It's a nice resource for that.
Yeah.
Everyone should jump on that and tell them exactly what they think.
Yes,
we're
they
really
should.
excited to have
Absolutely.
our stuff there. So you started this process. You had about 400 and some odd forms, and then now you went back into hearings, into committee hearings in
Last
Texas.
week.
Last week,
Yeah.
and watch the video. Great testimony. We'll get on
Yeah.
that another tactic later. But now you're back. Now you had been in, was it the session before y'all did this with a bill?
So this is our third session,
Okay.
and I've been involved for 2 of them.
Okay.
Actually, I had been involved in the first session, but I was so new, still very green, still feeling like I was swallowing the ocean, learning all of this association and side of the body shop business that I had never been exposed to. So I don't count the first session. The first session I was kind of like, you guys just take care of it and tell me what happens. And then the second session I tried to do that again. I was like, y'all just take care of it. And then our members were coming up to me, hey, what's going on with the legislation? Tell me about it. And I was like, I need to know this stuff. So I really dug in, learned more about the process, and now I finally feel like with this session, I finally understand what's going on, and I've got a really good grasp on it. But I think what you're probably wanting to know more is what the experience was like.
Was it different for the association? So not just for you two, but now you're back in the new session. It's 2021. You've had a new process kind of in play. Did this session feel different for everyone involved?
So this session felt different just right out the gates because we're facing so many other things right now. There's a lot stacked against us. every state is probably facing a lot of COVID legislation. We also had a huge snowstorm that came through and our power grid basically collapsed. So there's a lot of legislation in now to try to regulate whatever happened and where all that. We're also redistricting. We pretty much, if you could stack all the things against a auto body safety bill, that's kind of where we're at. So we are still seeing success. And I have to attribute that to the work that we've done, because we were moderately successful last session, and we've been told it takes many sessions to get things passed. So to expect it to pass first, second, even maybe third time is unrealistic.
You know what would be great is if you could just in like 1 minute say, we did this in the first one, here's what happened. We did this in the second one, here's what happened. Here's what we did in the third one that was different than those two, and here's what happened. I mean, just because I know that you kind of got up to a wall.
Yes.
And you got shut down kind of
Yeah.
a little bit, and then you took another run at it and got successful.
So the first session, and gosh, it's been so long, I couldn't even rattle off the top of my head because that was, the session I did this. We didn't make it very far in the process. I believe we went to committee but didn't get out of committee, and I may be wrong on that. Second session, we made it to committee, and then made it to calendars, and we were put on, and the calendar committee puts us on the calendar for the House floor, and another bill ahead of us was somebody filibustered and we ran out of time. The clock ran out on us. This session, we had a lower bill number, which that's very important because for those of you who aren't super familiar with the process, when you submit your bill, they give you a number in order of how it comes in, and that's in the order that they start addressing these bills. So the lower bill number, the faster you get to things. So we also made it into committee quicker. The feeling was that we were not going to make it out of committee. We weren't even going to get a hearing because of all this other major stuff that's being heard right now. But we did get a hearing, and our hearing went well. I think we're still pending results of a vote to see if we're going to get voted into calendars, but the process is just moving a lot quicker this time.
I mean, just keep taking another run, learn as you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and some of it involves, from a legislator's perspective, you go to the Capitol and you eventually, if you're first elected, you have dreams of changing the world, right? By your third session, you're just
Same
like,
with association work.
what? Right? So you go and you sit down and it's time to hear a bill. If it's something you've never heard about, right? So you're sitting here in a hearing and you've got this group of shops and a couple of auto body associations telling you this is the end of the world and people are going to die and it's unsafe and blah, blah, blah. And you're going, I've never heard of this.
Right.
No one's ever, I've never had anybody come to my office. I've never had a complaint. And you have the insurance lobby sitting over here going, we don't know what's wrong with these people. This isn't a problem. Thousands of claims are settled every day with no complaints and no worries. And you're like, well, it sounds really much to me like the tobacco industry. They went, thousands of people smoke with no cancer. We really shouldn't, if you think about the comparison there, I always get a kick out of that one. But the difference is between just filing the complaint, we need it on record, right? We need to be able to have something there. How many complaints have been filed against State Farm in the last year or whatever? Oh, hold on, let me go look, right? So we need those complaints on record. But you actually kind of warmed your audience. It's like going to a comedy show and you have the warm-up act. So
Exactly. And that's probably the talking point that I missed just now when I was explaining all of this. This has been huge in our efforts because one of the things we were told in the beginning is that with it being so hard to pass legislation, it's going to have to be personal. These legislators have to hear from their constituents because they may come to this and go, well, it's not a problem in my district. But if you are sending them these forms and they're getting 3, 4, 5 forms, it is a problem in their district. And they're going to perk up and listen and make this a priority. And warming the audience to it. This is something we started ahead of time and we're going to continue with too.
So that's the way that you want these to work as a shop. And it's sometimes hard if you're in a state where you got to get the consumer involved. But if you get that consumer to file that complaint, one, it needs to be well written. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But then two, they need to go to legislators. You can't just start with the Department of Insurance. They're not our white horse. They're not going to solve our problems. So you can send it to that person's state and Senate and maybe even federal, because we have some federal right to repair legislation and some other things going on right now that will affect us. But you also want to think about if there's a committee that hears all of these, even if those people are not in their district, I like to send copies to everybody on that committee. so that at least they're aware that this problem is bigger and it's all over the state and this is happening to everybody, not just my people.
Yes.
So that kind of compounds it. So let's say I have a committee of, what's the committee in Texas, how many people are on it?
I think there's 8 on our insurance committee.
Okay. So I got 8 on that committee. I have 400 complaints, probably spaced out between all over Texas. Maybe a representative, we don't know how many representatives that are actually on that committee of 8 were part of who got it. I know y'all probably went in there knowing that information down to the T, right?
And I resent before committee hearing
Right.
too, just to keep it fresh in their mind.
But to be able for all of those people to walk into this committee hearing and every one of them, all 8 of them would have received all 400 of those complaints, it'd have been like, oh my God, right?
I will say you do have to be careful too not to inundate them like right before hearing too. So it's like a delicate balance with that.
Right. If you're sending them as you go, I've sometimes found that if you do a capital day, that they're more apt to go, oh, come on in and talk. I've heard about your issue. I want to learn more or whatever. So it's just warming up that audience where you're not just another person knocking on the door that day or a hearing that they don't think is a problem. The insurance industry loves to say this isn't a problem. Because we know of the 1,000 claims that I'm going to handle today, just probably in this zip code, I know most of the customers at the end of the process are not going to be happy. They're not going to be happy with how it worked, how we interacted with each other, how long it took, those things. But they're not going to complain. We see that on PRIs, right? The customer finally gets to us after 5 or 6 complaints, but most customers who aren't happy with it just go trade the vehicle in and move on with their life. So they don't even hold the
They
shop
give up.
accountable. We can all think of a shop in our area that's horrible but has a 98% customer service rate. And we go, oh, is that possible? Right?
Well, that's because they gave them cookies and the paint matched.
And they
Yep.
fill out
That's
the
all.
form a week
Ahead
or
of
2
time.
weeks afterwards, after the car's been repaired or the day after it's been repaired. Then a month later, when all the problems come up, they can't go back and change anything. Unless you get the wackadoodle that's going to go online constantly on every social media thing
Right.
and blast the hell out of the shop because now they're annoyed. You know, that's the one that goes after you.
A lot of those shops coach them in how to fill it out. And, even hotels, it's like, if we're not a 10, let us know.
Yeah.
You
Or if
know.
you give us 10s,
Yeah.
we'll send you a gift card.
Right.
Which, yeah, it's
That's
all
out there.
skewed.
That's
It's like
out
you
there.
buy a car, you buy a motorcycle, they're like, oh, can you give me all 10s? Can you give me all 10s? Give you all 10s, you're making me pay for this thing. I mean, I'm going to give you all 10s. How was your experience? This is my 20th vehicle I've bought in my life. This is the 4th one I bought the same. Why are you explaining all the same car? I know more about the car than you do. Shut up.
The 6 hours I waited on finance, there was no
Yeah.
chair massage. I just don't know what you
Right.
people are thinking, right?
What's with all these fees all of a sudden? You told me it's going to be this. Now you raised another $25 a month because there's these extra fees. What's this $2,000 unpacking? I'll unpack it myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like my new truck took a month and a half to build. I was like, send me the parts. I'll put it together myself. I'll do it in 2 days. What are you kidding me? Give me a discount.
All right, so this is really part of why every shop in the country, if you are not happy with what is currently going on in your business, you're not happy with how you're getting paid, you're not happy with how your customers are being treated, you're not happy with how long it takes to handle a claim, if you're not happy, you need to join your state's Collision Repair Association. And then your state needs to be doing something very similar because we need to let more people who have the power to pass the legislation that will give you that white horse moment that you're hoping for, because it's obviously not a lawsuit. I mean, I think we can look back and, just Texas had a great lawsuit, had a great verdict. It was a great lesson for the industry. Did it make changes?
Change nothing.
Some
Very
things.
little,
It changed
very
it brought body shops perked up a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And started thinking
for a
about
short period of time, and you have 1 or 2 people that still mention it, but everything else, it just poof. It went away.
And the lesson there is that there is not a lawsuit. It's not if we sue State Farm, it's going to get it all fixed. There's not if we get a big case with a big verdict, this is all going to get fixed. So we have to have legislation to change things, and you need to be doing that through your local associations, and associations need to be doing something very similar to what you guys are doing, because it does pay off in the long run.
So let me say something real quick. So in your bill, and I looked at it, and I went online and I watched it all, and and there was some good stuff in there. But one of the things I noticed about what you guys did, as opposed to a lot of other states, is you didn't throw 20 things into it. You didn't say, okay, this is a labor rate, parts bill, appraisal clause. I mean, you didn't like throw all this wish list stuff into it. It was pretty streamlined. Whereas other states, they try and throw everything into it. Thank God none of it passes, because that's not good for shops sometimes too. But you guys refined down very nicely, condensed. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Well, thank you for that. We we have had 3 shots at it, and the bill has largely stayed the same over the last 3 sessions. But we were advised by our lobbyist and other people to not throw the kitchen sink at it, because if there's one glaring problem to the committee or to the House in this big bill, the whole thing kind of can get thrown out.
Yep.
I mean, of course, there's amendments that can be made and stuff, but once you're far along in the process, it's actually kind of daunting to get all of those things lined out. And things happen very quickly when you're in session. So we were given some good advice to pick a few things that are important. And of course, we started with safety. And our number one issue was the safety crisis around aftermarket parts. And so, just to really drive the point home with aftermarket, we're not asking to not use them. We just want them to be tested and be safe. And so that's gotten us pretty far in that. And then the appraisal bill's even more straight and to the point.
But they're separate.
They are.
They're not the same thing.
Yeah, correct.
You got the appraisal bill and you got the parts bill, but you're not trying to put those two together to commingle them to mess it up.
And I feel, and I think it's probably our association's opinion too, that you shouldn't look at legislation as a short-term, one-time thing. This should be something that you have goals set on for the entire duration of your association, and things change and morph, and try this, learn from this, and then once you're good at it, then start trying for other things.
I love the appraisal bills. I think every state ought to make sure that they get one of those passed. I loved the insurance industry's response to the one in Washington. Was just the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. If you want to go listen to that testimony on the Washington hearing, and the insurer's lobbyist response for why he didn't think that there should be a right to appraisal, bill passed, which is, this gives your customer a fair fight for a less cause than having to hire an attorney. And his response was, well, we don't really think this is needed, because once it passed, it means there's going to be more people using the right to appraisal. That's kind of the point. It was just the whole disconnection on their testimony was very interesting. And I think they used some of that same language when dealing with some of the things with James Rodas and the Nebraska people. So there's a lot there. I like that you talk about it. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And you just keep putting the bill up. Now, what's the future plans? So you're still in session, you're waiting on a vote. But beyond that in this session, what's the future holding for the association, and how you're going to approach this consumer complaints and all these things?
So what a funny year to ask what's the future look like, right? Because none of us
I just want to go to a concert.
Well, we lifted our mask mandate. So no, I think that this to me, and this is conversations we've had amongst the board, that this is something we want to continue, because originally we wanted to just ship these off to TDI, and interestingly enough, TDI read the article in our magazine about how we were going to send them 1,000 complaints, and they went, whoa, 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 whoa. Can we have a meeting with y'all and talk about this? So we got their attention. But instead of being able to ship them all off, we do have to file formal complaints on each one of these, and it is a daunting task. So it's taking some time, but again, right now we're focused on the legislation. But this is something that we're going to continue with, most likely, because our legislators need to know the issues that are happening in their districts, and it's important that they don't just hear about these issues during session. They need to know long term. This is homework. This is laying the groundwork for change in our industry, is letting our lawmakers know that there are problems. And so I don't think that we should ever stop letting our legislators know that there are problems. I'm sure at some point we may stop the form, but that's not in our immediate plans.
Right. Awesome. Well, that's going to be good to know. Let's talk a little bit about what a complaint should have. So if you do decide that you're going to advise a customer on that they should file a complaint when a customer starts to put together a complaint, or when you put together a complaint. So remember to keep in mind, it is not the Department of Insurance's job in any state to regulate what you are paid as a collision repair center. So if your complaint is that they're not paying for X, Y, or Z or whatever, those don't do so well. There are some instances in where you would file that it might be safety inspections or scanning or something like that. But you have to make sure that you shape that complaint within the language of what can be regulated. So that's either an insurer not applying the policy correctly, violating some sort of regulation that's on book, such as the Unfair Claims Practices Act or something else that you have. When those are written, they shouldn't sound like tattletaling to the principal. So you're going to want to make sure that you have all your documentation together. That may be photos, that may be emails, that may be text messages, voicemails, anything. Please don't send the Department of Insurance something that breaks the law in recording conversations. Right. Even though it's technically not like a legal, a hearing or whatever, that's just makes you look bad. It's not really a good thing to do. But you're going to want to make sure that you write this very much like a legal brief. So it's one of the things Erica and I always talk about. Think of how you would present this as an attorney to a jury or as to a judge, and make sure that it's very factual. You need to quote language in the policy. You need to share a copy of the policy. Even though technically every Department of Insurance has the policy on file, none of the investigators seem to know how to go find it.
Right.
Right. I used to have to file the policy with the state if I was going to sell insurance based on it, and they can't seem to find it when it's complaint time. But
they don't want to read it.
Right.
You need to point me to that
She's
spot.
sending the one with the invisible ink on it, so she could get away with it. That's why, lies, just lies.
Remember when you used to get your State Farm policy and it was that very thin paper and some of it was written in red?
Yeah.
Just saying. Okay.
That was
you? And it would disintegrate like after 4 months. You couldn't find it.
Just saying.
Don't leave it in the sun.
Yeah, don't leave it in the sun.
Just saying.
In air. Like this Ziploc plastic bag, but then you have to read it in the plastic bag. Otherwise, if you take it out, it just disappears into dust.
If you need to reference a regulation that's on the books, such as unfair or something else, you need to reference that specific piece with its full number, and then you need to quote what specific line you're referring to, and then you need to write a summary underneath it and say, this is why I believe what has been done is a violation of this. In other words, don't assume that the investigator that draws the lucky straw and gets your complaint that day that has to handle it, I don't want to say is competent, because please don't take it that way, but that they understand or see the situation the same way you do. Very often, a lot of the investigators with Department of Insurance are former adjusters. So they have sort of that way of looking at things, and so you have to, it doesn't mean that they're always on the insurer's side. A lot of times they're fired adjusters, which is, I had some situations here where some of the DOI people were people I had fired. And so when complaints would get filed, I need to ask that this person recuse themselves from
anyway?
The whole state's related.
Yeah, the whole state's related.
Yeah. We're not quite Kentucky, but I mean,
not quite Kentucky.
we touch kind of.
Okay, that's a wrap.
We share a border with Texas too. So,
Is this on voice
right.
Drag me into that.
Let's go with these two tied.
All right, so where were we?
I have no idea where we were.
Point to codes.
Point to codes, all right.
But let me recap real quick. You want shops to read laws. We can't get them to read repair procedures or P pages. And wait, then you want them to write.
I want them to write.
Have you
Or I
ever
want the
seen the
consumer to
handwriting of
write.
some people?
Right.
Forget about
like
the
me?
sloppiness. Oh, yeah, forget about it. You should be a doctor. But even then, the misspelled words and the run-on sentences.
So here's what we do, and the good thing to talk to, and that's a great point to bring up. But you have to write these like briefs. So I very frequently, and Logan is a great example. Sometimes I'll get a paragraph or a short summary from someone like Logan or another shop or somebody else around the country, and says, this is what I want to tell the Department of Insurance. Now, usually there's 4 or 5 emails back and forth where I'm going, what's your timestamped correspondence? Did you send in a supplement? Because if you didn't send in a final supplement, and got it in writing for me that says I'm not paying, when you file your Department of Insurance complaint, I'm going to go, well, they haven't asked for this.
Right.
And then the complaint's dead because I have to tell you to submit another supplement.
But you didn't give them an opportunity to come down again.
Right, so I'm gonna ask you for all that documentation, and then I'm gonna write you kind of like my version of how I feel and what regulations I think applies. I'm not writing the complaint for anyone, but I'll give you an outline of going, well, based here and here, this looks good. Please go, have it confirmed with an attorney if you want to do that, and then the customer can decide what they want to do. I'll send that back. It's usually me flying. Sometimes it's here flying my thoughts or whatever. It's the spelling's bad, the grammar's horrible, the whatever.
We've read you, yeah.
And
We're
then,
getting you thesaurus
and then
for Christmas.
someone else cleans that up and makes it a formal complaint. So a couple of things have happened. We had one in Texas that was dealing with abandonment of salvage by insurance companies. So right now, no one wants to pay total loss charges, and they're trying to figure out how to get out of that. And if you have a really good contract and a lot of things, sure, you are contractually bound to the person that owes the car that they owe you the money. But let's face it, that doesn't help when an insurance company doesn't want to pay, because you don't want an abandoned car either. What are you going to do with a piece of salvage? So trying to not get that done. So we were able to take an issue where a car was, where the insurer was attempting to abandonment, find a letter from the former insurance commissioner in Texas from, I think, 1986 or 87.
But it's
It was
there.
old. Let me blow that off. Write a really good complaint and says, this is the process, this is why I don't feel it's fair, here is a piece of documentation that I believe supports this, yada, yada, yada. File a complaint. It goes off to Allstate. Allstate very respectfully and handled it very, very well. Shout out to Allstate for that. Writes back and went, you're right, we can't do this. We didn't send a mitigation letter. And Allstate is 100% correct. Had they sent the mitigation letter, they
Well,
wouldn't
it
have
probably
voted
went
after
to
that date.
somebody higher up the ladder that didn't have an attitude or something and
Well-
looked at it and goes, okay, I see
A
where this
lot
is
of
at.
times, and when I first started, I, sitting in an office in North Little Rock, Arkansas, responded to Arkansas DOI complaints, right? As things have evolved, more and more insurance companies have departments that do that, and they're not even located in that state.
Right.
So the person responding to your complaint is not the local adjuster or claims manager that even handled it. It goes to a customer care center. Allstate is one company that has a group of people that are kind of like in police departments. What is it? The people that investigate cops? Internal affairs?
Internal affairs,
Okay,
yeah.
they have that kind of same department, and those people are told their job is to speak on behalf of the consumer. And when one of those people call you about your file, and they're like yelling at you to prove why you denied the claim or why you didn't do what you want to punch them. So
Yeah.
there's like a lot of internal fighting between, but some of those people do a really good job of protecting their consumer, and I think this was the case that we had gotten there, and they wrote back and told the TDI, we are so sorry, we're wrong,
Well,
and we're paying
that-
it today.
That same shop had an issue with a right to appraisal
Mm-hmm.
that basically was a total loss, and they didn't respond, and it was a borderline total loss, and it kept going on and on and on and on. And I warned everybody about involved, and the guy was all gung ho. Then he just got tired of it. He's just like, then they wanted to total his car out and take the car back. So he actually said to them, you know what, screw them, just drop everything. I'll just keep in my car, I'll pay the shop. I'm dropping the claim. And he wound up getting a phone call from somebody higher up, and they were willing to make a deal with the shop to pay off whatever it was, which was basically a maxed out, like 92% of the ACV, just get it done, and the shop lowered their bill to make that happen. And this happened to be that same shop who's been working out pretty well and stuff like that. He's
I
been
think
pretty
that
small with it.
particular insurer knew what they were
They
exposed.
just don't want to get hit with bad faith, you know.
Yeah.
Well, because what happened
not
was
only
the
that
local
that
guys
had the
made some-
potential to put in some guidelines around what was acceptable during COVID. So an insurer can't just tell the Department of Insurance, we're never going to go, we didn't go look at this car and we didn't pay because of COVID. We all get it, COVID happened, people were quarantined in their homes. Insurers had a duty to protect their employees. If an employee had gone out and gotten exposed to COVID in the course and scope of their employment, totally get why they did that. But I can't just not handle claims because of it.
Right.
And if a customer makes a decision to repair their vehicle because they've waited 3 weeks and nobody's called them back, you can't then come back later and say, I think the
Well,
car's
we had another case with a shop that different state went through an RTA and stuff like that, and they had storage charges because they had it documented that the insurance company didn't come out, but they were doing the photo thing back and forth with them, and they wouldn't respond for 2-3 weeks on 2 supplements. And it says directly, it says, don't continue on with any repairs unless we approve them.
Yep.
So he talked to the customer signed a piece of paper that says, don't do my repairs until my insurance company approves them. Okay, I'll hold. But the car's on the bench or the car's in the shop and I got storage charges.
Right.
It went to umpire and the umpire agreed.
Now-
That's unfair. You can't do that. You can't make them wait that long.
the
And
other-
rental coverage too.
And rental coverage, yeah, that got extended
So
also.
the other thing a Department of Insurance can do is they can interpret coverage, right? That's it's one of the things that they can do. So if we think about Richie and we think about Virginia,
Right.
and his very well written complaint going, hey, in this State Farm policy in Virginia,
That was Barry.
Barry,
Barry.
okay,
And
Barry.
then Richie also used it from
Okay.
West Virginia.
So in this state, the State Farm policy says that right to appraisal exists, but it says only total losses. We don't think that's fair because it's here. We think it should apply for all covered perils under the policy. Very well written complaint. went up. Virginia came back and said, yeah, you're right. Boom.
You're
Hey,
right.
State Farm, you're going to do right to appraisal and everything in the state.
Yep.
And once the DOI says that, I don't get to have my own
game over.
opinion. Right? It's
Yeah.
just like,
Which I don't
That's
understand.
the
I
way it
mean,
is.
how could any insurance company not have a right to appraisal in their policy?
wasn't used. I mean,
Yeah,
so
know.
I mean, that's the thing is I had
I mean,
all this
where's your
stuff in my
arbitra-
policy. y'all
I'm
weren't
not saying
using it.
arbitration, but lack of better wording. Where's your argument to your somebody that you have an agreement with? I mean, even our phones, all our cell phones, we all have arbitration clauses in there. Unfortunately, it says they pick everybody.
Right.
they pick the arbitrator. They pick this. So you just got to lose. You got to pay them.
And you have to go to Guam.
You got to go to Guam.
I didn't really want it there. I mean, if you listen to Washington when they say, hey, if we have to put the appraisal costs back, oh my God, look about all these people that are going to enact it.
Yeah.
So I didn't really want it there, and it was really easy for me to go meet with the state and go, nobody's using it. Now, it's still there on homeowners. You read a homeowner's policy,
No,
right to
homeowners
appraisal's
always
already
been
there.
there. Yeah, but they
because
have,
that's
they have something
contentious.
different. Most states have a public adjuster for houses, and if you're smart, the guy helps you with all the paperwork, or the girl helps you with all the paperwork, fills everything out, gets everything pretty much settled for you. It's not much of an argument. We don't have that in the auto collision repair industry that you have. That a public adjuster is involved in everything. Usually the shop takes it. New York, I mean, basically you just sign something called a designated representative, and the
piss
shop
off
with
the
no
insurance
licensing
industry,
outside
hire
of
a
being a
public
business
adjuster.
can do it.
Well, and here's the stupid thing. Are you a licensed public adjuster?
I am in one state.
I am as well. So
Yeah.
I understand that completely.
Crazy, yeah. If they give me a public adjuster's license, it's got to be. You guys might want to
Back,
rethink this.
from the homeowner's claims perspective, as soon as somebody told me they had a public adjuster, I was like, fraud.
Yep.
I mean,
Fraud.
SIU, here we come. Right?
Yeah, of course. Spoken like a true insurance person.
Right.
Look at that.
Hey, look, I put the hat on and tell you what I was
Uh-huh.
thinking all the time. That was never our
She
problem,
was just
Larry.
used
The
to
pro-
know. Like, the like button, like. Oh, that was easy button. It's no.
All the power in the world
Right.
to say no and no power to say yes.
But no,
Some
I
power
had
to
the
say
power.
yes, just didn't do.
Didn't
Yeah.
Kristen
You
write
just
that
didn't
book,
use
The
that
3
button.
Ds?
Right. I mean,
She wrote that book.
Delay,
Deny, delay, defend. Right? Wasn't that
Hey,
you?
it depends on how you're looking at the perspective.
Yeah.
So if I go back now, and I do still, I know people are gonna be shocked. I still work with some insurance companies and adjusters, and you hire them coming into this industry with they don't have any exposure. They're not body shop people. Their parents weren't agents. They don't understand this career, and they didn't choose it as a career. No one goes to college and go, I'm gonna be an adjuster. Because it's the worst damn job on the planet. And so most of them are just doing it until they can do something else, right? It's
Well,
not
like
the
you said,
career
most
it
of
used
the
to
time
be.
they're trying to get people out of the hotel clerk or out of Starbucks or
I don't
barista.
even need you to have customer service skills anymore, because clearly that's not important to anyone these days. But you come into this and you are legacy trained by the people that are in front of you. When you're sitting in a cubicle for your 8-hour shift, answering the phone of the people who have nothing, that are just really angry all the time, because no one calls claims because it's a joyful experience, right? People call claims because they're really upset that their car's been wrecked or whatever, and you're getting yelled at all day long. But probably 90% of what you handle is not a body shop complaining or asking for all of these other charges. Then that shop that does is very easy to be seen as they're different, so that they're the only one thing. They're different, and all of these other claims are getting fixed, and these are our DRP shops, and these customers are happy, and so why would these people need it? From their perspective, they just don't understand. And so it's, there's not any malicious intent. There's no training where somebody goes, okay, here's all the things we're not going to pay for, right? That doesn't happen. But they just don't understand what's going on, and we tend to shout back and forth because it's frustrating to not get paid the proper way to fix a car. It's frustrating to have to explain why you should inspect seat belts.
Well, I can tell you, when I was an adjuster a long time ago, 95% of my interactions, it was the easiest job in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The other 5%, I had to fight a little bit as an adjuster, but pretty much most shops didn't fight,
Well, that was years ago.
which is sad.
Well, if you think about the 80s and 90s, I mean,
was the
literally,
90s.
I mean, 90s, early 2000s,
Yeah.
and if I go into, I know that when I was a DRP director, it was a completely different story, but I'd pull up at a shop, and I got out, and I had that, the State Farm 3 circles on my chest and whatever. When I walked in, they wanted to buy me lunch, and they wanted to get
wash
me
your
coffee,
car
and they wanted to wash my car and vacuum it out, and then I would walk to the back of the shop, and then everybody would be like, hey, we need to ask you some questions. Unfortunately, during that time period, 80s and 90s, some of the insurers were more technically sound than a lot of the repairers. We had, I think about Bob Medved and Binkert and
High-tech
all those
toolbox and
guys.
all that.
that were running high-tech toolbox. And the reason that show existed was they were trying to educate body shops on what the new technology was, because our trade magazine sure as hell wasn't doing it. So they were trying, and we would go into shops and we would get asked about repair procedures. The OEs were coming to corporate and working with us on repair procedures and things to get done. So we've had this shift happen, and everything's cyclical in the industry. But complaints, right? You want to make sure that they're documented, that they're well written, that they're somewhat like a legal brief. They can't read as though you're whining and crying about what you feel as the problems with this industry or the slight. The next thing, when something is just a business practice you don't like. So let's say you're a body shop and you have a customer and you've written a repair plan and you say it's going to take 10 grand to fix the car, and the insurer says it's going to take 3 grand to fix the car, and you guys come to an impasse. And the insurer basically convinces the customer to pull the vehicle to another repair facility that they say has agreed to fix it for the $3,000. Your consumer can use that as a complaint. So it's not just the ability to be able to say, hey, bring that back for a PRI. But if the facility that they're asking you to take that car to says they're going to fix it for $3,000, then you can ask that consumer, okay, go ahead and move it, but tell them no supplements are allowed. Right? Once they pay more money to fix it at that facility than what you had involved, that's a business practice complaint. If you think about insurers that are mutual companies, that is a pool of money that belongs to the mutually insured policyholders, and misuse or overspending of that money is not taken lightly, especially if that insurer wants to come back and ask for an additional premium increase.
Right.
So for you that say they're paying more to total it and take it out of here than they are to fix it. So if your fees for teardown are $5 and they're going to willing to spend $5 to get it out of your shop and another $5 to fix it, but you only wanted $7 total, that is an insurance complaint that your customer can write and say, I don't understand why my insurer is spending more of my policy money, which may be a chargeable loss to me, which may affect blah, 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 blah. That's a business practice. It doesn't mean they're going to jump in and go, wait, no, you can't pull the car. But you're starting to make a record. When total losses, when cars get totaled at unrealistic amounts, so let's say 20, 30% of damage, yes, right now salvage is through the roof. It just is. The used car market, in the way, I probably every car with 50% damage is probably a total loss right now, mathematically, if we looked at it. But let's say you feel like you're being extremely targeted, where everything that comes into you is instantaneously a total loss. That affects people, because I may not want to get the car fixed at your shop, and I may be punishing you. And we're going to talk about, Matt's got a question on here, and we're going to talk about that one. But that customer gets their car totaled. They may be upside down. Right? They got to pay taxes again. They've got to do all this stuff when they buy a replacement car. So that customer can file a complaint and say, I feel like I'm being victimized here. Right? Keep track of and try to figure out what maybe like a DRPs are getting paid for. So very commonly you'll get a appraisal, let's say for instance, the DRP always gets paid to scan a car, but you're being told that they're not going to pay that to you. A customer can make a complaint and say, why am I being discriminated against?
Yes.
And so that's a business practices. And so you start to build those complaints, now when we are going to go and make a movement on legislation, and why, Kristen, why do we need an OEM repair bill that says you have to follow OE procedures? Well, I'd love to tell you, because here we go. Here's where seat belts aren't being done. Here's where scanning's not being done, et cetera. So use them as a database of complaints. Don't think about it or approach it as it doesn't matter because I never get a result. It's, Chinese water torture. It's just a drip. Drip, 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 drip. So let's take some questions. We've had some come in. I definitely, and before we wrap this, Jill, I want to talk about what's coming up in Texas for the rest of the year, and some things. So, Matt, you're having some bad days, right? Okay. All right, so Allstate car insured adjuster was on vacation. The claim set not handled for over 2 weeks. Once the adjuster come back, they rolled our total loss charges and settlement amount, forced the customer to retain salvage. What should I do? Okay, very similar to what Logan's case was in Texas. You're going to want to know your total loss laws. So total loss laws in states are a couple of different ways. One, they determine how titles have to be, and then two, there are regulations on abandonment. So a lot of states have this around property and homeowners as well. So let's think about if a house burns and half burns and you pay, They don't want an insurer to just basically abandon the structure and leave it burned and whatever.
Right.
So there's abandonment laws that apply for a lot of different things. You're going to want to know those laws, and then you're going to want to look and see if it's been covered before. So like in Texas, we found a letter, an old letter, from the insurance commissioner
From 1827.
instructing insurance companies that they could not abandon salvage at shops. And so that would be there. Whatever your abandonment laws are, you may want to look at those. But the really kicker for how to avoid abandonment is to make sure that you have a really good contract with a customer, because an insurer is not supposed to put their customer in a periled position and cause them a financial. That's that fiduciary responsibility
Right.
they have. So no one takes too kindly when insurers are being punished. There's no training in claims anymore, so a lot of these people don't understand what they're doing when they just go, I don't want to pay that big bill.
Right. Yeah.
I agree with you. I don't think
I
you
hate
should have paid
that
it either.
shop. I'm not paying it. Screw them.
Number-
This, that, the other thing.
Number two, Matt, if we were talking about this and you can always go on collisionhub.com and it'll say book an appointment with Kristen, and you hit that button and you can get on my calendar and we can talk about any claim you want to, any specifics that you want to cover. I would ask you what your documentation process was through that 2 weeks. So how often were you advising them that your storage charges were accruing and that they needed to get it? But make sure your documentation is on point and your contract is good. The safe light issue and assigning claims. That's a twofold problem. So there's the safe light being intruding, or I want to say being put in the middle and having to handle glass claims, because insurers don't want to handle glass claims and have staff for it. So they've got Safe Light working as their glass company, and they're throttling what's going out to the independent glass companies, and then sometimes Safe Light's canceling orders. It's just, but that also is affecting the PDR industry. So CAT response is expensive. I ran a CAT team for 3 years. We were expensive. My adjusters were expensive. Our housing was expensive. Our travel was expensive. Sending us to Texas, I had a 50,000 claim hailstorm in Dallas one day, and I thought, damn, tent city popped up overnight.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is impressive.
How hard was that? She put up a tent. She had 87 people down there and just denied every single claim.
No, we wrote estimates.
Yeah, sure you did.
And if you were my estimator and you didn't write 25 a day, your performance wasn't good.
Right.
And I got
25
mad.
a day.
25
on
a day
claims.
and a
See
hail
what that
drive-in.
was 300, 300, 300, 300.
Replace
Some
hood
were
roof.
300.
Replace hood roof deck lid. Replace
Right.
hood roof deck lid.
But now we have a third party interfering in that to where they're writing the estimates, and then when it goes to an independent shop, the supplements are sent through them. So I have had some conversations with several departments of insurance on whether that meets the definition of adjuster and whether those people should be licensed and
Right.
how that should work. So if they're not acting as a repair facility now, they're acting as an adjuster because they're adjusting the claim on behalf of the customer. It's completely different than if you're a body shop and the customer drives the car to you and says, let me have an estimate. So once they change that role, I think the Department of Insurance should be kind of Erica's working on that with a national association. So Safe Light issue will roll up in that, and it basically becomes who's allowed to be an agent of the insurer in the
Right.
claims process. So there's a difference between being a public adjuster or an appraiser and being a indemnification arm if you're deciding what's paid. Do shops that file a complaint mysteriously lose their DRP status? I'm not going to lie to you, yes.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie to you. Anyone will tell you no, but I mean, we also know that if you ask for too many supplements for too many of the right things, or if you tell a customer that they're owed for seatbelt inspections, you mysteriously lose your DRP status.
Which is probably a good thing in the long run.
Yeah.
Your claim count's going to go down.
Which is good.
I got it. I'm
Less
just
is
saying.
more.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
So,
Come to the dark side.
So we had a great comment here from Shannon, Shannon Christian, that started using Right to Appraisal, and it's increased their average payment by 40%.
Wow.
So that's a good statement there to have.
Yes.
Matt, I'm going to go back to your second question. I agree with you that I've heard this said. So basically he says is, what do you do when you have a director stand in your shop and tell you, I have a $20 million budget for attorneys and I will bury you in your business if you keep contacting us about this claim? What is the
Bring it.
customer? Yeah.
Bring it. Bring it because you don't. You have
He-
a big mouth. You have a big mouth. Once corporate finds out what you're doing, you're going to be in a world of trouble.
Well, that's
because you're
twofold.
talking like a tough guy, and you can't back it up because you just wrote a check that your ass can't cash.
But they do it every day. And so
They
here's,
do it every day.
Here's the
But it's a
twofold part of it, Matt.
bull Totally tactic.
I 100% believe that somebody stood and did that to you. Sometimes it's a field manager that feels a little bit too brazen and bold, like Larry says.
Put them on the phone with me. Give my cell number. I'll talk to them for you.
Sometimes that stuff happens. So I have pushed insurers to the point where I've had suddenly the state of Arkansas shows up here to audit me on my payroll taxes and whether I'm compliant. The fire department showed up the next day to check if my fire extinguishers were 12 feet apart, and they're out here with a tape measure. Then I had OSHA show up. EPA didn't show up, but I had OSHA show up. And then right after that, the Attorney General's office called me laughing, which I thought was funny because I have some friends over there, and they're like, hey, this particular insurer got the Department of Insurance to call us and tell us that we needed to investigate you. I was like, awesome. When are we having lunch? And so I was just like, so that stuff's very true. So what does your customer do? One, again, if you booked an appointment, I would ask you for the whole story. If the insurer has already told you no, we're not paying, but you just continue to send email, then sometimes that crosses the line, and I would tell you it's time to step up and go to the complaint process or file suit. Your customer would need to file suit at that point. Secondarily, your customer can file a complaint. If they feel bullied, intimidated, and threatened, most of the time that is written into the Unfair Claims Practices Act, some sort of that. So you could file that in as well. It's okay for the customer to call the DOI and go, I don't know what to do. I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I have no one to turn to. I'm broke, I'm poor, it's COVID, I can't hire an attorney, please help me. And to their credit, a lot of times they will help. AG will push back to the Department of Insurance. Yes, if you're complaining about you don't believe you're being compensated under a policy for a fair amount, the Attorney General cannot do anything about that. If you feel like your business has, like, where there's tortious interference or whatever, or that it's some sort of consumer issue that the Attorney General governs, they will. It's just in all how you present the complaint to them.
So do you suggest that in instances of tortious interference that they do a TDI complaint and Attorney General, or?
The TDI has no regulation power over tortious interference.
Okay.
So it's a business regulation, and they don't regulate or have any enforcement power over that.
It's just insurance.
Hey, but it toes a fine line between steering and tortious interference sometimes.
The most Department of Insurances will tell you that they have no. So like we have steering law in Arkansas, but the way that it's a bill or a regulation passed through the House that went through, and it's our aftermarket parts bill as well. Because it's not a Department of Insurance regulation, our DOI cannot do any enforcement on that.
Right.
Okay.
So I have insurers right now that write from out of state, and in Arkansas, 3 years, 36,000 miles, no aftermarket parts. The estimates come in and have aftermarket parts on them. And the DOI is like, we agree that's a violation of that statute, but we're not the regulatory body for that statute.
Right.
So it's important that you know what your DOI can and can't do. Steering, to just call it and say they're taking cars from me or whatever, some of that, we pushed some cases in the mid-2000s to test the waters as insurers, and some of that came back and said, yes, it's okay for me to say, if you go here, you may have to pay out of pocket.
Yes.
It's true.
Yep.
That's not steering.
That's not steering. No.
So some things that we feel are steering are not.
And steering is
right?
very difficult to prove. You have to prove a loss of money and a loss of amount and show it. And it's just a massive, huge case to take over, even if you have it directly up front. I mean, look, New York State has a law that says you can't tell an insured your DRP program unless they ask you about it. And they all have word tracking to get it through. That it sounds like to the layperson, yeah, but legally, no. Because once again, they had a lawyer that looked over it and they gave the word track, and it's a way for them to get it in. You know, oh, we have a DRP program, and you know, you might have to pay more at the show. Well, what's this DRP program about? Oh, okay. Well, now explain. Aha.
They ask, right?
That's how they get you.
Yeah, there's.
So it's almost like you put a little fishing hook with a worm on it to catch a fish. And then once you do that, then the big net comes in and grabs everybody in one shot.
I actually had a claim where Spring got hit, dropping me off actually to come out here in November. Some guy came around.
So she's at fault.
Well, yeah, it's Kristen's
fault.
Yeah,
but she's not paying.
And so the adjuster, so I public adjusted, so I took the claim for her, and I said, so basically they said, okay, you know, do you have a shop that you want your client to use, or do you want me to recommend one for you? That was the word track.
Right, and I'll put on that insurance hat. There was a time long ago. I believed in my DRP program, I believed that my field adjusters were choosing the right shops, were monitoring them, were ensuring that everything was correct. I wanted to tell you about that program, and I believed that it offered you benefits as a consumer that got you a good repair with less friction, right? We've all heard the horror story where the customer chooses their own body shop and that body shop rips them off, et cetera. As an adjuster and a claims manager, I would get calls from those customers going, they did blah, 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 and it was, I didn't like saying, I'm sorry, I can't help you, you didn't use our network.
Right.
And I felt bad for those people. So there's a desire to want to tell people about the program, and they believe in it, and then sometimes going outside that program may mean you have out-of-pocket expenses. And that's not lying.
I actually have consumers tell me, when I get involved in them, sometimes they're not happy with the shop, and they go, well, why didn't they tell me about their network?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're mad because they didn't know about it.
Well, if you think about it, everybody who's doing all this PRI stuff, and
Yeah.
whatever the case is, with some of the people that we know that do it, it wouldn't be around for anybody except probably me and maybe you if there was no DRPs.
Right.
Right.
Because now when somebody calls me up and I get the case, it's like, oh, well, it was third party. I chose my shop. You have to sue the at-fault insured.
Yep.
That's the best you can do, and sue the shop. What are you talking about? Well, it's not a DRP. No one's going to get involved, and I'll see you in about 3 years before you need to hire me. What are you talking about? Get a lawyer, get this, make a state complaint to the New York State, it's DMV, you can complain to safety inspectors, and by the time it goes through, it's 3 years down the road. It's like, but the car doesn't run out. Hey, listen, I told you shouldn't be driving the car,
Yeah.
but that's a problem.
So Matt's response to you is that he told the guy the same thing, bring it. So
Good.
Yeah, I mean,
Nice to hear, Matt. That's
everybody's
it.
woken
You thought,
up,
what
right?
would Larry say and said it?
So, all right, so a couple of questions on what's the easiest way for you to find your state laws. I'm going to just be truthfully and brutal again, there's not. So a lot of these statutes, or I don't want to say statutes, a lot of these...
complain with that. I find that if you go to, what is it, Jutista Law, Julista Law, whatever the hell it's called, that website,
Yeah.
if you go in there and type in unfair claims practice,
That's an
like
easy
Georgia
document to
or
find.
New York, I seem to find those quickly that way.
Right.
Online you can't, like it's impossible to find Regulation 64 now on the website. You
Well,
can
so,
find it on
but here's the
Google.
thing. Unfair Claims Practices Act, very easy. They're usually always linked to the Department
Yes.
of Insurance website. But when we start talking about minor statutes, like a statute over here that says what storage has to be, or the statute over here that talks about
much harder.
abandonment
Yeah.
or whatever, those laws are tucked in lots of different places. So is there an easy way to find all the laws that apply to you as a collision repair? No. Which is another thing that if more shops are part of their associations, associations can retain attorneys. That's their job, is that on retainer from the association, they research all the applicable laws,
Right.
situations, scenarios, and they're there to help the member shops. But if I have a state that has, how many body shops in the last survey in Texas?
5,000.
5,000. How many members do you have?
125-ish.
Right. So if I got 6,000 shops in a state the size of Texas and only 100 are taking the time to join the association and give money,
It said.
then that's a problem. Montana Association actually retained an attorney. And she's
So does
helping.
Rhode Island?
Yeah, helping with lobbying and helping with other things. So this is what comes when you guys join associations. Instead of getting on, well, of course, we love that you're on Facebook because you're on Facebook now watching. But instead of getting on there and complaining and talking about, I can't believe they're doing this and they're doing that, join your association, go to the meetings and go, hey, let's get an attorney. Let's hire one and put them on
Yeah.
retainer.
And
Hey, let's write legislation.
Yeah, and that's a goal of ours too. But again, also if you're going to write legislation, you need to also have a lobbyist.
Right. And that's expensive.
Yeah, all this stuff is expensive. So it's interesting if you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm not joining my local association because they haven't done anything. Well, they're also sitting there going, we can't do anything because no one will join.
Right.
So it's chicken or the egg thing. And
Exactly.
if we all start to see some associations, which I think we are,
Right.
in the United States making some headway and doing some things, then that shows that it's possible in your state too.
Right, and that's how you guys are going to get. I don't want to say you because you're
Yous.
never you
Y'all.
guys are never going
Yous
to
guys.
conquer or change the insurance industry. You can change your industry within it and make rules, regulations, laws passed that work with you. You're never going to change how this insurance industry works. In some ways, yes, they do have a $20 million budget or a $20 billion budget for some things, right? So, and I worked claims litigation counsel. It's a really big budget. so there's a lot of money there, but there are things you can do within your association, but they can't do anything unless people give money and join. So the other way that you can do it, and I'm sorting through the people that are saying hi to you, by the way,
Hi.
and giving you shout outs saying that they are ABAT shops in question. So I'm trying to get through those. So please apologize for that. But I'm going to go change this slide here. besides just joining an association and being a regular member, you can support associations by attending events.
Yes.
And you guys are probably, I think you're going to have the
Yous
first,
guys.
you guys are going to have the first trade show we've had since 2020.
Well, I think Northeast might be the week before.
Oh,
ours.
okay.
I think it's the week after, actually.
Well, we're telling everyone they can ship their stuff between, so I know
Okay.
it's close.
Okay.
I know
I'm
it's
going to
close.
both, so maybe I should figure
good.
that out,
You
right?
should probably should, yeah. Just worry about this one.
Yeah,
I'm
I'll
kidding.
be there.
I'm kidding. I love my friends over there. But yes, attending events. Not only things like this, but your local meetings and just events that the association puts on. But this one in particular, we are very excited about. This is going to be our 6th year having a trade show, and every year it gets bigger and better. And you know, we've got lofty goals to be like some of the larger shows in the nation, and we have specifically introduced factors this year that kind of put us in those realms. And so this year we have changed locations. We're at the Irving Convention Center.
It's nice.
It is. It is. And we were looking for kind of that destination factor, and that's one of the things that is great about like some of the other big shows. They've got big cities and things like that, and of course in Texas we think we're the greatest. But we want
can
y'all
open
to
carry.
Thanks.
We like you.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. So. Surrounding the Irving Convention Center are 23 bars and restaurants. There's axe throwing. There's frozen yogurt shops,
Alcohol and axe throwing with open carry.
Oh
There's
my gosh.
actually,
I know.
okay,
Right?
That'll work out well.
what I like about
We've
the
made it
Texas
this
show,
far.
other than all the great stuff, is there's actually a bar in the middle where you can have, you can go up and order a drink and keep walking the booze.
And we have a new thing this year that we're going to be introducing, which
Oh,
is a
geez.
happy hour on Friday night and Saturday night.
On the floor.
Free beer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
free beer, okay.
Yeah, free beer on the floor.
So the great thing about local, or I say local or regional shows, one, Texas, getting in, being on the Fort Worth side instead of the Dallas side or the Irving side.
1 hour in the middle.
Yeah, kind of in the middle. You're closer to the stockyards, which is a nice draw. The zoo, the Fort Worth Zoo is amazing. There's a lot of stuff to do. It's a major airport. Dallas is a hub,
Yes.
so in and out is a cheap flight. And a lot of the vendors, probably all of the vendors that you see at this trade show floor are the same ones that you see at larger national shows, whether that's SEMA or when we had NACE or whatever. So you have a chance to go to a show, in and out airport. I think really by the way you guys have got this, some people come and make this a day trip. I could catch a
Yes.
morning flight in, go to the show, and fly out that night and be back home.
And there's public transportation between the airport and us too.
Yeah, so you don't have to rent, you don't have to take an Uber. There's just a lot of things that have set this up to be a great show. So I know some people have told me they're super excited and we're all ready to go to SEMA. I start to panic because all the planning that I have to do for SEMA. And some people have said, hey, Kristen, I'm just not ready to go back into an environment with a couple 100,000 or 200,000 people. Regional trade shows are perfect for you.
Yeah.
And just because your state may not have one, you can go to a regional trade show for somebody else.
That's right. And actually, we will be getting everyone together who's coming from out of state and other associations, so we can all bounce ideas off of each other. And we should have about 100 booths. And these guys bring out the big stuff too. Like, I mean, full benches set up. Carolina brings full equipment. It takes them all day long to set it up. So you're going to see some really cool stuff, live demos. And then additionally, we also have educational segments.
And apparently drunk axe throwing.
Yeah, and
That's-
drunk throwing.
A statement in here that I want to cover, one of the questions, not technically a question. Yes, so there are some policies that are so every insurer eventually writes the policy and puts language in there. Insurance policies were never intended to pay for everything. It's kind of like your health insurance. You have a health insurance policy, it doesn't pay for everything when you get sick or you go to the doctor or do whatever. So a lot of insurers are starting to put language in the policy that has limitations around total loss charges, et cetera. Couple of things to remember there. One, when adjuster tells you that they have a policy that says they only pay $1,000 for
Aftermarket
whatever,
stuff.
total loss or whatever, you want to see a copy of the policy. You want to make sure that the issuing number on that policy actually matches the policy that your customer has in force. So ask for a copy of the deck pages. So at any given moment, I may have 3 or 4 different auto policies going on in the state of Texas because I have to wait for things to attrition out and I may introduce a new policy, et cetera. So I used to walk around, and if any of you remember it, I had this fold out thing that just kind of kept going on the floor, and it had the 7 different auto policies in it, right? And I would have to make sure, and I'd go to the deck page and go, okay, this customer has this one, and I'd pull it out and look at it. So make sure that if they say they have it, the deck page matches the language in the policy and it all works up.
And they're different.
Right, they're all different.
Yeah.
So this is new language in the policy for this particular insurer. Then number two, you need to read that policy and see if that applies to first party coverage only, because a lot of adjusters, because they're not trained appropriately, misinterpret that what is in the policy also applies to a claimant. And so I like to read that and go, hey, this doesn't mean that the insurers, so if we think about personal or PD and BI limits, I can have a PD policy that has $25,000 per person, $50,000 max.
Yep.
Okay, so even though I have $50,000 max, if it's $25,000 per person and Larry gets hurt, he has $50,000 in medical bills, what do I pay him?
$4 million.
$25,000.
Yeah.
That's the maximum of my policy.
25 per, yeah.
Right, because he's an individual, so the 50 doesn't
Well, I
apply.
fell down 4 times in that one collision.
He gets the 25,000.
So I get 100,000.
But not 50.
Right, but not the
If I got
50. He gets the
100, I fell
25.
4 times.
I know.
Help me out here, public adjuster.
If they write the policy to
corners of the
say
policy,
that
dude.
only $1,000 applies to any loss, then yes, that particular insurer would owe everybody, claimant and insured, $1,000, and then the at-fault party has to pay the rest. That's what small claims court is for. God, it's
Yep.
brilliant and it's wonderful. But most of these are first-party coverages. That's where they're putting that. And so then you can, on a claimant, you can go, okay, that's great. I agree you have that first-party coverage, but it doesn't apply here. So always make sure that you don't argue, and don't yell at them, and don't go, you're going to pay me, and the car's not leaving here until I get paid, and all the things that we like to do.
But insurance companies don't pay you.
Very calmly say, that's great. Could you provide me this documentation? We'd love to review it. And let them send it over to you, and then go from there.
And then get good at reading policies.
It's a chess
Anybody that's
match.
ever called me, I said, give me the policy.
Right.
That's where we start.
Excellent. Jill, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
We are excited to about what you're doing there. Hopefully a lot of states, if they come to the trade show and y'all get together, a lot of states will look at this. For my state associations, this is what I believe from my perspective, my history as an insurer, you should be focusing on. Focus on your legislation, focus on your DOI complaints, focus on getting an attorney that can help train, we can get some court on some things.
Yes.
It's hard to get to court on some things. We have great cases, we just don't have attorneys that don't want to take them, right?
Yep.
Awesome.
So is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think we
You
covered
drove all
a
the
lot
way
of.
up here.
I know, right?
Crystal's
Put
going
me
to
on
close
the
this thing
spot.
out, and you're like, oh man, I should have said. So
Trade show,
Smart
join
move.
the association. Those
Yeah.
are the two big
Yeah,
things.
if you're in the state of Texas and you're listening to this and you're not a member of the association, join today. What's the website?
www.abat.us.
.us.
And you can reach out to me, Jill at abat.us. I'm happy to help you. And like we were saying earlier about laws and stuff, those are things that we do have on file. So if you've got questions about things and want us to point you in the right direction or send you stuff, we can do that too.
That's awesome. They're there to help. So if you're in Texas, make sure that you join. Things don't get better until you put the work in. I don't go to the gym and I'm still not skinny. So those things seem to correlate, right? So put the work in, and the work usually comes with a little money and a little sweat and investment. So, well, good luck with
Thank
September.
you.
You've picked I love that venue, by the way. I do a football camp kind of close to that, and I go there and eat. So
It's awesome.
I mean, I don't do the football camp. I put my kids in the football camp, and then I go to the bar.
There's plenty to choose from.
That's my mission. All right, well, we will be back and I'm going to look off screen to make sure I get the right time. We are back at, I believe, 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock.
All right, we're back at 1 o'clock with iCar is here to talk about electric vehicles and everything that you're going to have in your shop. So what kind of charging stations, lifts for the batteries, storage for the batteries. We're going to answer any and all EV questions.